Hello, my name is Jeff Messier. I'm a professor in electrical and software engineering in the Schulich School of Engineering, and welcome to the winter 2023 ILS version of ENCM 369. So the purpose of this video is to basically give you an introduction to how the course is going to be run. So I'd like to start out with the learning objectives for the course. So what are we going to be learning in ENCM 369? Well, basically, there's kind of two learning objectives. The first one is we're going to learn how a high-level programming language like Python and C gets translated down to a very low-level kind of binary format called machine language, where we translate our program right down into ones and zeros, right? So all of you by now will have had some experience with programming in Python or C, one of these high-level languages, and we're going to look now to see how that gets translated into something that a machine can understand. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to basically pick up where ENCM 353 left off, and we're going to take all those logic gates and flip-flops, and we're going to build a digital machine that can execute our binary machine language. So in other words, we're going to build a computer in 369. And by doing this, you, by the end of 369, are going to know how a computer really works. And so, coming into this class, and just people in general kind of have, many of them have sort of this very kind of vague sort of metaphorical understanding of how a computer works, like the CPU is the brain and the hard drive is how you remember stuff. Wi-Fi is how the computer talks to other computers. But we are literally going to build a computer from flip-flops and AND gates. And you, by the time we're finished, are going to see really exactly how a computer works, which is pretty amazing because obviously computers are a pretty big deal. So in addition to our learning objectives, basically what I want you to learn in 369, I also have some objectives for myself about how I want to teach you in 369, and I call these my teaching objectives. And I basically have three. The first thing I want to do is I want to offer you a personalized learning experience. The second thing I want to do is make sure that we learn as a community rather than as a bunch of individuals. And finally, I want to design the assessment in this course to encourage or incentivize learning. And so I want to touch on each one of these 3 points. So first of all, how am I going to give you a personalized learning experience? Well, I'm going to do this by using the flipped classroom technique. Now, if you've had experience learning online in high school or university during COVID, you might hear the word flipped classroom and you're like, oh, here we go again. This is going to be a Zoom lecture, or worse yet, it's going to be, prof is going to take some old recorded Zoom lectures that are all grainy and weird, and we're going to have to sit through them. That is not the case in 369. So yes, as part of the flipped classroom technique, I am going to be making use of pre-recorded video lectures that I post on YouTube that you're going to watch outside of class. And then when we get together for our in-person sessions, rather than me just sitting there lecturing and you sitting there listening, we're going to take advantage of our in-person time by having actual, two-way discussion. And I love this way of teaching. I was teaching this way way before COVID. So I've been teaching this way since 2014. I've now got 6 classes up on YouTube, over 120 videos up on my YouTube channel, because I love this way of teaching. It turns out that this was pretty COVID compatible, but that's not the reason why I'm doing it. I believe this offers a personalized learning experience basically for 2 reasons. The first thing is I'm a big fan of video lectures because pre-recorded lectures allow you to go through lectures at your own pace and learn when you are best ready to learn. Not everybody's ready to learn at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. Some people are afternoon people, some people are evening people. And the nice thing about a video lecture is that you can go absolutely at your own speed. So if I'm talking about something that you're finding really easy, don't waste your time. Double speed me on YouTube, get through the lecture and move on to something else. If we're at a part of the course that you're finding challenging, however, make sure you pause the video, rewind, listen again, think about it. So you can adjust the speed to learn on your own terms. And I do make a real effort with my videos to make sure that they are good quality videos. The video is good, the audio is good, the visuals I think are good as well. The nice thing about the flipped classroom format is then we can really take advantage of our in-person time, the time that we're actually, together in the same room, to, allow me to be best at what humans are best at, and that's interacting. So in a traditional lecture format, back when I used to teach that way, I would teach maybe for 90 minutes and I would probably get 4 questions in 90 minutes. And that's not because the students weren't interested, but it was because they didn't know what they didn't know, right? They were hearing the material for the first time. They were just concentrating on writing it down. They hadn't had a chance to think about it yet. The big advantage of the flipped classroom model is that you have had a chance to think about the material. You've looked at it, you've made some notes, you've got some questions, you've maybe taken a look at the assignment, and then when we get together in class, you can pepper me with questions. So the purpose of our in-person sessions is only discussion and only questions, and then we can make sure that we focus all of our in-class time on the issues that you find important and or challenging. So many of you will be experienced with video lectures, but I just still have a few tips I'd like to remind you of. First of all, treat the video lectures just like a regular lecture and make sure you actually take notes during the video lecture. I will be providing you with some slides. However, I want to emphasize that I don't give you everything on the slides. I give you sort of the content that would be annoying to have to replicate when you're, when you're writing it down, like diagrams and things like that. I make sure I give you all of those in the slides. But I don't necessarily label all the diagrams. And if we're going through like a particularly difficult section of math or something that really needs to be figured out, typically what I'll do is I'll just put up a blank slide and then I'll start writing by hand, just like I used to do when I would write on a whiteboard or a blackboard in a regular lecture. The reason why I do that is because it slows me down. If I have to write it down, I'll make sure I go nice and slow. It gives a good pace to the lecture. Also, it forces you to write down what I'm writing down. And that, again, reinforces learning. So if it's a difficult thing, I want you to have your pencils out, your pens out. I want you to be writing things down on paper just like you would in an actual lecture hall. Obviously, you can pause me, rewind me, listen again, but it's really, really important that you take notes during the videos. There's also a ton of content, so make sure you spread the videos out. I tend, the videos are of a variable length as well. They're not all, identically the same length. There might be some videos that are 30 minutes. There might be some videos that are an hour and a half. So make sure you check the videos, you know how long they are, and you allocate enough time. And finally, make sure if you have questions, don't post your questions in the YouTube discussion area. I put my stuff up on YouTube because I believe in sharing knowledge, but I never ever monitor my YouTube discussion forums. So I want you, if you have questions, to post them on the D2L forums, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a second. So second of all, in ENCM 369, it's very important that we learn as a community. And kind of my fundamental philosophy or guiding principle when I'm teaching students is to keep reminding you that your questions are super valuable. So if, and I've been teaching for a lot of years, I know for a fact that if you have a question, there are many other students in the class that have the same question as you. And if you ask a question, that question is super valuable, super useful for other people, and should be shared with everyone. And so because of that, I don't tend to use private communications with you when we're talking about the course content. If you have a question, I want you to ask it in a way that other students can benefit not only from your question, but also my answer to it. And I do this in a couple of different ways. First of all, in 369, we're going to be having a series of in-person sessions. These are going to typically be on Thursday morning. You'll be able to see the exact timing in the calendar on D2L. But these studio sessions will be in the ILS room. They're going to be in person only. I'm not doing any Zoom or any recording this year. And each in-person session will be a mix of discussion and hands-on lab exercises. So we're going to gather as a community. We're going to have a discussion where people can ask questions. I'll answer the questions, and everybody will, hopefully benefit from that discussion. So the studio sessions, I think the discussion is going to be extremely valuable, so it's important to attend. The hands-on exercises, the hands-on lab exercises, we're also going to be supporting you in the studio session, so it's really important to come to get help from us on the hands-on stuff. And you can only be marked in person for a lot of the hands-on exercises, so that's another reason to show up. The other way that I really encourage community learning is by using D2L discussion forums. I am a super enthusiastic user of D2L discussion forums. This is my number one preferred way to answer questions, and for a couple of reasons. So first of all, on a discussion forum, everyone can see your question, and you can post using your name, you can post anonymously, either is totally fine. But when you post a question and I answer it, everybody can benefit from it. I'll talk a little bit about reference materials later on, but there is no textbook in ENCM 369. However, I like to think of the discussion forum almost as creating a custom textbook specific to, the the winter 2023 class. I subscribe to the discussion forums, and so as soon as you post, I will receive an email that notifies me of your post, and I will reply to it as soon as I would reply to an email. I monitor these things every weekday, a little bit on the weekends, but not so much on the weekends, but certainly every weekday I monitor multiple times, and so you can expect answers from me basically every weekday. Really often very, very quickly after you post your message. To encourage discussion forum posts, I actually will not answer questions that you send me via email. So if you send me an email asking me a question about the course content, a concept, or question 3 on the assignment or something like that, I will not answer it via email. I will just tell you to repost your question on the discussion forum. If you're shy, you can post anonymously. You don't have to feel self-conscious. The only exception, however, is if you have communication that's of a personal nature. So if you have questions about your marks, those are confidential and should be emailed to me directly. And also if you're dealing with a personal issue like an illness or a problem at home or something like that, and you need me to be aware of it, that should be sent directly to me. That's private communication. And I will have a number of discussion forums up that are specific to the different portions of the course. And so please, it's pretty self-explanatory, but please be sure that you use the correct discussion forum. And again, this helps your classmates who are trying to learn from your questions. If we organize the discussions, so all the questions for a particular topic are in a particular spot, when somebody wants to go and review these questions, then they know where to look. They're not sort of hunting all over the place. So again, I'm a big fan of discussion forums. I really work hard to make sure that they're an effective way to learn, and so definitely make use of them during this semester. So finally, my third objective is to design sort of my assessment in ENCM 369 to encourage or incentivize the type of learning that I want to occur. I've been teaching long enough that I know that assessment is how we incentivize you to study. So if you're going to be tested on it, you study it. If you're not going to be tested on it, you don't study it. And that's true, right? So that encourages coverage. I want to be sure to test you or assess you on everything. But the way that you design assessment, exams, marking, will change the nature of how you learn. And specifically, I want you to be able to improve in ENCM 369. So, you might find, you studied up, you prepared for the first exam, and you wrote the exam, and it turns out you had more trouble with floating point numbers than you thought. You thought you knew what you were, you knew all the methods and the concepts, but there actually were parts of floating point numbers that you didn't quite have a good grasp of yet. Rather than just moving on to the next topic and never, evaluating you again, I want to give you a reason to improve. If you're weak in an area, I want to give you a reason or an incentive to go back, restudy that stuff, fix any problems that there might be, and do better. And this is in the pedagogical sort of realm. This is what's known as a mastery approach to assessment. Essentially, it's the philosophy where you allow students to keep trying over and over again until they reach a certain level of mastery before you proceed to the next sort of area of the course. I'm not going to allow you to try over and over and over again, but I am going to provide the opportunity for rewrites on the exams to allow you to sort of loop back, improve, and sort of hopefully achieve a certain level of mastery for each one of our topics. And so to provide a little bit more detail, the course is going to have 2 exams that are going to be held during the term. And there is also going to be a registrar scheduled final exam slot, but I'm not going to be giving you I'm not going to be examining new material in the final exam slot. Instead, that entire 3-hour slot is going to be just for you to rewrite parts of exams 1 and 2 to improve on your mark if you want to. So it's an optional thing, and you don't have to rewrite an entire exam. Each exam is going to be broken into parts, and you can just choose the particular part from a particular exam that you want to improve on, rewrite that, and then your best attempt will be used to calculate your final mark. So I'm going to have an exam introduction video for you later on in the course to give you all of these details. But basically, the way that I make all of this, rewriting possible is I implement these exams on D2L. So they are D2L quizzes, but I administer the D2L quizzes in person. And so the way that works is if you have access to a laptop or a tablet, I ask you to bring it to the exam room. You do the D2L exam online in the exam room where I am and the TAs are, so we can make sure we're supervising everybody, we can answer questions. And because we're using D2L, it's very easy for me to create new randomized versions of tests, which allow for the rewrites during the final exam period. However, I should emphasize at this point is that you are not required to have access to a laptop or a tablet to take ENCM 369. There still is the option to write a paper exam if you don't have access to a device. But if you do have access to a device, then I think this is most people, I do ask you to bring it to the exam room. Anyway, I will be posting more information about how these exams are going to run in a separate video as we get into the course a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about how 369 is organized. I've basically divided 369 into four what I refer to as modules. And each of these modules consists of a series of components. Each module starts off with a series of video lectures, and I've got the links posted in the content area of D2L along with PDFs of the slides. After you watch the videos, you will do an online multiple choice quiz on D2L. This is an asynchronous quiz. It can be done anytime before a particular deadline. After the multiple choice quiz, we're going to have one or two, usually two, in-person studio sessions, right, where we gather together in the ILS room to discuss the course content and work on the labs. After our studio sessions, there's going to be a written assignment that's due, and also during the studio sessions, we're going to be working on hands-on lab exercises. Every module is going to have a lab exercise except for the last module, Module 4. So let's get into this in a little bit more detail. So like I said, the first part of the module is the video lectures. I've already talked about the flipped classroom format. Following the video lectures, before we gather in person, you will do an online quiz on D2L. The purpose of these quizzes is basically to keep everybody caught up with the course material. So the quiz is due before each studio session, and this is basically my way to guarantee that everybody has watched the videos before we have an in-person discussion. The questions in the quizzes are conceptual questions, so I ask you about sort of ideas. You don't have to do any kind of calculation typically, and I do mean them to be fairly straightforward as long as you have watched all the videos and have taken careful notes. So if you follow my advice, if you treat each of the videos as a lecture, you take careful notes, these quizzes obviously are open book because you can do them at home. You can refer to your notes, and typically the class average on the quizzes is really, really high. Like I said, this isn't really, they're not meant to be hard. They're just meant to give you a reason to keep caught up with the videos and to make sure everyone's watched the videos before we have a discussion. So after you write your online quiz, we will then gather for typically 2 in-person studio sessions. Those studio sessions will be Thursday morning from 9 till noon, basically. They're more or less 3 hours. These are in-person only. So this year, there's not going to be any, simultaneous broadcast on Zoom or pre-recording of these sessions. They're only in person. And these sessions are going to be pretty flexible, but they're basically going to more or less consist of 2 parts. When we gather right away at 9 o'clock, it'll be just you and me, basically, so the class and me. And the first, usually 45 minutes or an hour, is meant to be discussion. So this is where, as a group, you can ask me questions about the lectures, you can ask me questions about the assignment problems, and I'll answer your questions, and it'll be kind of a classroom-ish format. And then once the questions are sort of over, what we then are going to do is transition to the lab part of the studio session. So usually after about an hour, the questions will be, exhausted, and then we'll transition to just allowing everybody to start to work on the hands-on lab exercises. For this part of the studio session, the TAs will join us, and then the TAs and I will just sort of circulate around the desks and help people with their lab exercises. I want to emphasize that no new material will be taught during the studio sessions. The studio sessions will just focus on the material on the video lectures. I'm not going to teach you anything new. And after the studio sessions, there is going to be a written assignment due. The written assignments are meant to prepare you for the exams, right? So this is kind of how you start to study up for the exams. The written assignments are to be done in partners. and are due after the studio sessions. So you'll have lots of time during the studio sessions to ask me questions, and then you hand in the assignments after that. There's some formatting instructions on the assignments. Please follow those. You'll submit these as a single PDF in the D2L Dropbox, or the appropriate D2L Dropbox. And assignment solutions will automatically appear after the due date. You can see the rubric that will be used to grade the assignments if you click on the Dropbox folder inside D2L. And it's really important that I emphasize that the assignments are marked complete or incomplete rather than correct or incorrect. As long as you have made an honest attempt to solve the question and you've shown, sort of appropriate method to try and solve the question, you'll get full marks even if your solution is wrong. The reason why I mark complete or incomplete is because it removes the incentive to cheat, basically. So as soon as it's correct or incorrect, if you're not totally comfortable with the material, you're going to start to worry about just getting the marks, and you might work too closely with one of your classmates. However, if marking complete or incomplete, it takes the pressure off. Go ahead, do your best. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. When the solutions are posted, compare your assignment with the solutions. If there's any sort of differences or any things you didn't understand, ask questions on the discussion forum and clear up those questions. You'll receive just a rubric rating for each question. You won't get written feedback from the TAs on the assignments. If you do have questions about how you were marked, you can email the TAs. But just because we have only a limited number of TA hours, and I don't want them to spend all the time marking the assignments. I want them to concentrate on helping you in the studio sessions. I'm telling them not to give written feedback on the assignments. Okay, the hands-on labs are a big part of ENCM 369. The purpose of the labs is basically to develop, sort of basic or fundamental skills, programming and using the peripherals of the AVR 128DB28 microcontroller. By the end of 369, you will be very, very comfortable using the AVR 128 microcontroller for all kinds of things. This is the device that we also are going to talk about in detail in the lectures. You're going to use it a ton in the labs. And the whole thing that I'm trying to work towards is for you to get super, super comfortable working with this device. It's such a cool, versatile little chip. And then you can use it in your ENEL 300 design project as sort of like the core of your, design. There are going to be three labs, possibly a fourth lab that is part of a joint assessment that I'm going to be working on with Dr. Murari and Dr. Potter. But there'll be at least 3 labs that are specific to 369. And the labs, very importantly, are to be done individually. This is a new thing for me. So in the past, I've done group labs where you work with a partner, or if you work with a group of 3. However, this is just so fundamental to 369. Like, it is just so important that every single student has, a basic level of ability working with these chips in an actual real hands-on design, that I've decided to run the labs individually this year. So there'll be some logistical things to manage, but I think the benefit of making sure that everybody can demonstrate competency in working with this chip is going to be worth it. You're going to be marked a couple of different ways. So you are going to be submitting your source code to D2L. However, you are also going to be evaluated in person based on demonstrations of your circuit. So I'm going to ask you to use the microcontroller to do certain things, sample signals, generate a sinusoid, turn LEDs on and off. And myself and the TAs are going to be circulating, and when you're ready to demonstrate your circuit, we'll give you the marks for that. So you're going to have to show us a working circuit, and you're also going to have to answer a few questions about the MCU during the lab. So there's going to be questions that I have in the lab handouts, and we're going to come around and we're going to ask you to give us the answer to those questions. So again, this is something that, like, if you're not sure what the answers are, you can ask us and we can help you. We're going to work with you on this. But again, it's just to make sure that everybody has that understanding of what's going on with the lab exercises. And I'm going to also, like the exams, I'm going to be giving you a separate sort of introduction or orientation video for the labs once we get a little bit further into 369. So you're going to see on the course outline, when you look at it, there's 5% assigned for something called reflections. Reflections are actually something you're going to be doing as part of ENEL 300, but since some of these reflections are going to touch on 369 related topics, there's a portion of your 369 grade that's allocated towards these reflections. And basically, so your reflections mark from ENEL 300 is going to determine the value of this 5%. If you are not currently registered in ENEL 300, most of you should be, but if you're one of those students who aren't, please send me an email directly, and there'll be an alternate exercise for you to do. This is just the mark breakdown. You'll be able to see this in the course outline as well. 10% for assignments, quizzes, the labs, and then exams 1 and 2. Just a word about reference material. There is no required textbook for 369. This class is going to focus on the AVR and ARM processor architectures. And really, much of the reference material that we're going to use are the AVR datasheets that I've got posted on D2L. Another thing I want you to learn in 369 is to learn how to use a microcontroller datasheet. This microcontroller datasheet, especially for the labs, is such an important reference. It wouldn't actually be an exaggeration to say that, rather than programming labs, the 369 labs really are datasheet reading labs. So it's basically impossible to do the labs without reading the microcontroller datasheet. And in every lab handout, I'm going to recommend the sections of the AVR datasheet that you should read. But I will be referring to the AVR datasheet and some of the other reference material as part of the lecture content as well. A useful secondary reference is Digital Design and Computer Architecture by Harris and Harris. You should already own this book from 353. Depending on, I believe probably you would have the one that focuses on the MIPS microarchitecture. We don't talk about MIPS in this version of 359 or 369. Again, we focus on AVR and ARM. So Harris and Harris, it's not super useful, but it's not too bad, especially for the binary numbers and stuff like that. So, and most of you should own it already anyways, so you can refer to it, but it's not something that we're going to be using particularly closely, at least in my version of 369. And basically, I make sure that the lectures, the assignments, and I'm going to be giving you practice exams as well. That material gives you everything you need to succeed in 369. So you don't really have to worry about trying to find a textbook in addition to that. And also it saves you some money. Now, regarding staying informed, I use D2L for everything in 369. I use D2L for absolutely every single form of communication. And so it is essential that you are on D2L all the time, basically, for 369. So rather than, and the key to staying informed in 369 is to make sure that you subscribe to the individual items within D2L. So for example, I'm not going to be sending out group emails to the class when there's, things to let you know about, like maybe an error I found in the assignment solutions, or, talking about something related to the exam. I'm instead going to post as news items. However, you can subscribe to news items within D2L so that you get an email automatically generated every time I post something, right? So it's basically like an email, except the news items stay up on D2L so people can keep referring to them. It's also very important that you subscribe to all of the discussion forums on D2L. So, and this is what I do. So every time anybody posts to D2L, I automatically get an email. It's important that everybody does this. Now you might say, well, why do I need to, be notified when somebody else asks a question? I only care about my question. Again, everyone's question is valuable, and don't assume that your questions are the only ones that are important to you. Somebody could be asking a question that you didn't even know was a problem, right? They might be asking you about something that you didn't even know you didn't know. And so it's really important that you take the time to monitor everyone else's question as well. And please post. So if you've got a follow-up question, or if you can help with the solution, please post. Again, it's really, I really want to make sure that we learn as a community in 369. The schedule in 369 is a little bit variable. So we have studio sessions every week that are going to be Thursday morning. The registrar has given us additional time Friday afternoon for labs. Most weeks we won't use those Friday afternoon slots, but sometimes I will use them for optional drop-in sessions for people. The exams are sometimes on Thursdays, sometimes on Fridays, and so everything is going to be posted on the D2L calendar. So the D2L calendar is basically the definitive reference for what's going on in 369. Everything that's happening in 369 will be in that calendar. If there's nothing in the D2L calendar, that means nothing is happening. So for example, even though the registrar has scheduled us Friday afternoons, if there's nothing on Friday afternoon in the D2L calendar, that means nothing is happening Friday afternoon and you don't have to attend. All due dates for everything are posted on the D2L calendar. However, I should point out that sometimes for group assignments, and this is relevant mainly for the written assignments, those due dates only appear once you enroll in an assignment group. So before you do your assignment, you need to find a partner, enroll in an assignment group inside D2L, and I'll post more information about this. And then once you enroll in that group, then you can see the assignment due dates. And going forward, I'm going to assume that you are aware of everything that I post on D2L. So if there's an important point raised in the discussion forum, I'm not going to send out another email to try and draw your information back to that point. I'm going to assume you know about it because I'm going to assume everybody's reading the discussion forums. And again, this seems like, it's a lot of information to go through, but this is basically our textbook, right? This discussion and, people's questions and my answers to it, this is the supplementary material in 369. Just a few words about supports. So I really want to emphasize that we, and when I say we, I mean all of the instructors in ILS, all of the TAs in ILS are here to support you. One of the reasons why I love teaching as part of ILS is I've never experienced a group of instructors and TAs that were as collaborative and as focused on supporting students as a team and as a group. And so really take advantage of that. We are absolutely here for you, but we won't necessarily know you're having trouble with something unless you reach out to us. So make sure that you engage. Like I said, I monitor the discussion boards constantly. Every single day of the work week, I make a point of checking it at least a couple times, if not more. My coverage on the weekends might be a little less, but I try to check them on the weekends, particularly if an exam is coming up. Be sure to read other students' questions. The TAs and I are going to be in person at the studio sessions, there to ask questions if you like in-person support. Assessment is a little unusual in 369 with the the in-person computerized exams and the rewrites. I'm going to post lots more information on this. It should be clear, but if it isn't, please ask. And also, one thing I'll draw your attention to, and I'm sure other instructors are doing this as well, is, be sure that you're aware of the university mental health supports. And the Wellness Services website is a good place to start to access this. Mental health, I think, is something that, in general, as a society, we're starting to get better at. Recognizing how important it is, and making space for when we need to take care of our mental health. But and university is stressful. Even if there's nothing else going on in your life, university by itself is stressful. And if you've got other things going on at home in your personal life, it can really be a lot. And so don't be afraid to reach out. I would be shocked if you or people close to you haven't had difficulty with mental health. I mean, I've had to go through a lot of mental health stuff too. I've accessed supports at various times, and it's really been valuable for me personally. And so I hope that you don't forget that as you sort of, not only for this class, but for, life, really. Finally, just to end off, who's going to like this class? Basically, if you're a hacker, you're going to love this class. And I consider myself a hacker, but I consider myself a hacker in the old school sense of the word. So something called the Internet Engineering Task Force, which is actually an official body that defines internet standards, has a list of terms, and they actually have the word hacker in their list of terms. And this is a quote from the IETF document. A hacker is a person who delights in having an intimate understanding of the internal workings of a system, computer, or computer networks in particular. So basically a curious person. The word hacker is sometimes misused in a pejorative context as somebody who compromises the security of computer systems. Cracker is actually really the accurate term to refer to those types of people. But a hacker is just a curious person. And I really want to sort of make curiosity an important part of 369. If you are in electrical or computer engineering, you're at least a little bit interested, I hope, in computers, right? Computers are a big deal, obviously. And 369 is really where we stop speaking euphemistically about computers. This is the brain, this is the memory, this is how it talks. And this is where you really understand how they work. Like literally building a computer with AND gates and flip-flops to the point where you can run actual C code. So this is a super satisfying course to teach. And I really hope that you're as excited to learn about it as I am to teach it. So I really look forward to meeting you in the introductory week and in the studio sessions to follow.